Hey friends, did you know it's super easy to get started doing full text search in your C# applications using the MongoDB C# driver with MongoDB full text search? Well, it is. I'm Lise Carter, a developer advocate here at MongoDB, and today I'm going to show you how you can really easily add search functionality to the backend and front end of your Blazor application. So let's get started. So in order to follow along with this tutorial, you're just going to need a few things in place first before you start. You're going to need an IDE or a text editor that can support C# and Blazor development for the most seamless developer experience. For this video, we'll be using Visual Studio 2022, but you could use something else like Visual Studio Code with the C# Dev Kit extension, JetBrains Rider, or whatever else takes your fancy. You'll also need an Atlas M0 cluster, which is our free forever tier perfect for development. The sample dataset loaded into this new cluster, your connection string for use in the application settings, and last but by no means least, a fork of the GitHub repo that's cloned locally onto your machine that we'll be adding search to, and links to all of these can be found in the video description below. The first thing we want to do before we make any changes to the application code is to go ahead and create a search index for our database. So here I am in the Atlas UI, and you can see that I am inside my M0 cluster that I have deployed. And along the top, you can see that I am on the Atlas Search tab. Now, it'll talk to you here a little bit about Atlas Search, but we can go ahead and click the Create Search Index button. Then it starts this wizard to create our search index. Now we are going to use the visual editor here just because it's nice and simple. You may choose to use a JSON editor in future, but for now we're going to use a visual editor. So that's selected by default, so just click next. Then give it a name. So the default is default, funny enough. We're going to change this to be title because that's the name of the field that we're going to index against. So you'll see a list here of databases and collections in your cluster. If this is your brand new cluster with just the sample data set loaded, then you might see something a bit like this where you just see it with sample. So we're going to expand sample mflix. We're going to click movies. Then we're going to click next. So what we want to now do is add a field mapping, because if we don't do any field mappings, what will happen is that it will automatically just map every single field. And then later on, when we specify in the code that we want to use a specific field, it will complain. So we're going to click this Refine Your Index button here. And we're going to add a field mapping. So we're going to click the Add Field Mapping button here within that little section. And we're going to find the path that we want to do. So we want to do the title. So we can search for it or select it from the drop-down. Now you think here that for data type we want string. What we're actually going to do is select this special data type here called autocomplete. The reason that we do that is because, well, it makes sense, right, in an interactive application to have autocomplete available so that not only can we customize the front end to support autocomplete, but that the back end database will also be able to support it. We can leave the rest of the properties as default. We just wanted to make sure that we are mapping against the title and it's autocomplete, not string. So we can click Add. You can see now that it's there under field mappings. If we scroll down and click Save Changes, then you can see that it's still there. And we're back to that page that we had before we click Refine Your Index. So final step is click Create Search Index. And then you'll see this nice little success box here. Great. This will take a couple of minutes to go ahead and create your search index. So come back in a second when you've received an email to say that your search index is created, and then we can start adding those changes to our front end. So the first thing we're going to do is update our backend in order to support our new search functionality. So here I've got open the project as you would find it from GitHub with no changes made. So the first thing we're going to do is go into services and into our iMongoDB service interface, and we're going to add a new method, and this is going to be a IEnumerable of type movie. That's going to be movie search by text. Then it will take a string of the text to search. Obviously, you could get back more than one movie, so we make it a list. So we can save that. And then if we go into the MongoDB service now, it will want us to implement that missing method. So we can do that. That will appear down at the bottom. And then we can start implementing it. So I will provide a gist in the video description of where to get this code. But all we're going to do is take this full method and replace it with this code here. Then we're going to add in some missing using statements. Oh no, there we go, it sorted itself out. So we've got some fuzzy search options here just to allow a little bit of flexibility in terms of spelling and accuracy. Then we build up a pipeline. So search is a stage in our aggregation pipeline. So what we're doing is calling aggregate on the movies collection, then saying do the search pipeline and do a autocomplete search against the movie title with those fuzzy options. We're using the index name that we created earlier called title. So if you chose to use something different, make sure that you have added that in there. Then we're saying that we want to grab the movie, but we want to exclude the movie ID because the _ID field we don't need. So there's no point bringing it back. And then cast that to a list and return that list. Nice. So now that bit's done, we need to make sure that our using statements are there at the top. So we should see that we're using models, driver, and search. So depending on what text editor or IDE you're using, it may or may not auto-complete those using statements for you like it did for me, for example. So just make sure that those using statements are there. And just like that, our backend functionality is able to take in a string to search by and go ahead and ask our database to carry out that search. Neat. So we have our backend ready to accept our searches. Now we can implement the front end. Now this is actually going to be in two parts because we're going to have the code inside the Razor page to talk to the backend, but also communicate with the front end to receive the search term as it's typed. And then we're going to have the search box being added to the HTML so that the users can actually type something and search for it. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the Razor page here, and we're going to start to add some code. Now you'll see here that we've already got some existing code inside the Razor page because it implements things like pagination and the searching. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a few new variables here inside the class. So we're going to do a string for the search term, if I can type it correctly. We're also going to do a timer for debounce timer. And the reason I'm doing this is in software development, if you've not heard of this term before, debounce is this idea of how often you essentially wait. So the reason we might want to wait with a search box is that because we're going to set up autocomplete and we've got the backend set for autocomplete, we could potentially overwhelm the server. It wouldn't normally, unlikely to happen, but it's just good practice, could potentially overwhelm the server by sending too many requests. So you just add a slight interval just to give that little break between searches. So in this case, we're actually going to set this to be 200 milliseconds. Now we've got those variables, we can start using them. So I'm going to copy and paste some code here and then talk through it. As always, you will find a link to a gist with all these code snippets that are being used in the description. So we've added a search movies method. So if the search box is empty, then just get everything so that, if say a user starts typing something and then deletes it again, it will just display every movie. Otherwise, call that new method we just wrote and pass it that search term that we declared as a variable. Then we've got the debounce search. So again, if it's empty, just search movies. Otherwise, start an async method, search the movies, and call something part of the component called stay has changed, just to let it know that something's changed. Then we've got a quick input event handler method here. So set the search term variable that we created, set it to the value of the change event arg, so the parameter that's being passed in. Then the debounce timer, dispose of it, start it again. And basically say that when the timer finishes, call debounce search at the interval we specified of 200 milliseconds and there's no timeout. And just like that, we have the code in there to take input from a search box and send it to the backend. Now we actually want to add that search box to our UI. So what we're going to do is at the top of our file, we're going to go ahead and paste some more code. And we're going to do this up at the top inside the header. So we've got a link here, which is essentially the title that is on the header bar in the application. We want to leave that there so that users can click the name of the application and come back to the home page if they want. And then we just paste in this div. So it's using Bootstrap because that comes out the box of Blazor. So it's a form. We then have an input box, which is a form control, and we set some sizing stuff related to it. It's a type search. We have a search placeholder text, bit of ARIA support for accessibility, and then some stuff here for like the Blazor side of it. So we've got on input. So when we type into it, we call that event handler function, and we bind the value of the input to our search term string. And just like that, we have a front end functionality implemented to talk to our backend to create search. Now it's time to test our application, but before we do that, we want to go ahead and add our connection string into our application so that it knows what to talk to when we run it. So go into appsettings.json and appsettings.development.json and just make sure that you update the Atlas URI with your URL. So it will look something like MongoDB plus SRV, your username and password you set up for the account for your database access, and then your cluster URL. You can leave the database name as is, because obviously that is the name of our database. Once you've done that, just save it and we're ready to run our application. So go ahead and click the start button so that it loads the application. Give it a few seconds to start loading, and then once it's built and running, you will see your application. So the application is up and running now, and you will see that we have the search box in the header. Now, no styling's been applied, so obviously it's in a funny position and it doesn't look great, but for the sake of testing, we can accept it as is. So we're just going to go ahead and type something in here, maybe pot. That will go ahead and search, and you'll find anything that matches. Because we have the fuzzy options on with a flexibility either side of one, anything where you can potentially get pot by changing one letter will show up. So we've got paw here because you could change the O to a T. Peter Pan, you could change the E to an O. So if you wanted to be specific, you could take out those fuzzy matching options that we put in. But there you have it. One search box added with search functionality and autocomplete. Nice. So now you've seen just how easy it is to get started with MongoDB Atlas search using full text search in a Blazor application with the MongoDB C# driver. Give it a try. As ever, all the links that you need to follow along with this can be found in the video description, and if you prefer a written version, this can also be found in the video description. Happy searching!